Okay, hi everyone. Mic working? Awesome. Cool. Hi everyone. How many of you filled out the UIKonf survey that they sent when they announced the 2015 edition? Cool. Some of you, quite some of you. Great. So one of the most requested topics were something along the lines of Tales of the Trenches, which is kind of what I'm here to talk to you about today, some of the things I learned. So to start the story, we have to go back about 14 years when I was 10 years old. And I was crazy about the computer. I was always on it. And I stumbled upon this. Now, I don't know how many of you guys recognize it, but it is indeed Adobe Photoshop 7. This is pre-CS times, guys. This is ancient. But I loved it. I spent day and night on it. I couldn't get over it. But after a few months, I realized that, well, just making wallpapers and some cool things that I could print and put in my school notebooks wasn't exactly what I wanted from it. So what I started to do was build websites. And slowly but surely, I found myself becoming an engineer. Definitely by the time I went to university and realized that actually that field is a lot more about efficiency, and beauty is found in neat solutions to algorithmic questions and mathematical solutions and equations rather than colors and compositions and elements on a screen. But that's cool. I like that too. So I happily graduated in computer science, and after some soul searching, stumbled upon my job at SwiftKey, where, by the way, we dance too, and we do lots of fun things, but my teammates would probably kill me if I put a video up here, so unfortunately, you don't get to see that today. But I was hired as an iOS developer. But when we started working on the first product that I ended up shipping, we found ourselves that there was a bit of a gap in terms of design. So before I knew it, I was back to doing some design work too, which was very exciting for me because I find myself drawn to it all over again. And however, I realized that actually I know very, very little about it. Having passion alone for something was not nearly enough to make up for the fact that I knew very little about design as I sat there and the head of design was talking to me saying, okay, well, make some personas and about the features you're doing. Can you make some flows for that and some use cases? And I'd also like to see a scenario. And I'm going there thinking to myself, well, personas, aren't they made up people? What's the point of them? So I studied like a good person. And so today I want to talk to you a little bit about what it's like to design apps. Slightly, possibly the different side of engineering an app. And you might find that it's actually not that different. There are a lot of parallels one can draw between the two disciplines. Like, for instance, designers basically test their designs as well. So when you create a design, you often find yourself wanting to validate this. Will it actually satisfy people? And this is where use cases come into handy, because you'll define things that users will want to do with your application, like a user needs to be able to sign up. A user, if they sign up, would expect to be able to log out. And what you do is, as you craft your designs, you test it against those things. But why exactly would a user want to do these things? How do you make this up? Well, this is actually where personas do come into play. Because yes, you give them a fun name and you give them a pretty picture, but what they actually allow you to do is define the types of users that will be using your application, and in turn help you to define the expectations that these people have as soon as they download your app and open it. There are various types of users. They may not apply to the app that you're working, at least not all of them, but often we find that they fall roughly into the following categories. We have our first-time user, a potential novice, not really tech-savvy, might be new to the iOS platform, doesn't really know what to expect or what they're in for. You've got your productivity user, who opens the app and immediately wants to know what the value of the app is and how it will fit into their jam-packed lifestyle. You've got early adopters, probably quite a lot like the people in this room today. We read about things on Twitter, Lifehacker, we find out about it quickly, we open it, we skip through the onboarding. No one's got time for that. We know what it will roughly do, right? We can figure that out. People use it for business. You've got people who use their devices primarily for social, and all they care about is how it can allow them to talk to their friends better or more effectively or more fun, in a fun way. And you'll see this come into play as soon as you start crafting some of your designs. Now, at the top, you recognize the infamous hamburger menu. I'm not going to go into whether this is actually a good design paradigm or not. That's a discussion for a different time. But if you are a power user, if you often go through lots of iOS apps, you will have come across this, and you'll probably know roughly what to do with it. You'll know that, hey, if I tap that or if I slide it out, I'll find some settings, I can probably do some things with it, great. If I'm a few levels deep, I can go through with the back button and end up there again. But your first-time user, your novice user, might not know that's possible, might spend ages trying to find the logout button, may not know that there are different modes to your application, which you could easily display in a tab bar view controller, for instance. Which the power user then might say, well, hey, but that's wasting screen real estate. If I'm in this mode, I don't really want to know about the other stuff. Can you hide it for me, please? So you can see where these things start coming into play and how it's difficult to satisfy multiple people who have different expectations. But that's why they exist. You want to test your design against all of these constraints at all times. This allows you to have all people be able to use your application and hopefully enjoy it as well. But this takes time, and this takes some time away from other people because there are a lot of things to think through. When I talk to my deaf friends about design problems I'm working on, I'll be like, oh yeah, this thing I'm stuck on and I'm not entirely sure because, this other platform has defined it this way, and often I just hear like, well, why don't you just do this? As JP said yesterday in his talk, as developers, we're debugging everything constantly. We're always looking for problems. And with that, we're always looking for solutions because otherwise the problems are pretty useless if we can't fix them. But unlike developers, if you're a designer, you can't just go away, code it, test it out, run your complete integration test on it, and get an outcome. It actually takes a lot of time to take into account all of these people's opinions on your design, whether it means that they can still use it. And unfortunately, our tests don't have a binary outcome. It doesn't pass or fail. It's a very gray, muddy area that you find yourself in. Something may be slightly better for one user, but could be drastically worse for the other. And you're continuously kind of battling to make sure that you can keep all people roughly happy. And sometimes chucking in the quick solution is not great because it will introduce UX debt. I don't know if this is a term. It's supposed to draw a parallel to technical debt. But if you introduce that hamburger menu because you think, well, I can't deal with this, I want to shove it out of the way, we're going to neatly encapsulate it into this quite known paradigm, it's very hard to then move away from it. If you find out afterwards that it's actually a mistake and you didn't want to do that in your design and actually will cause a lot more problems, moving away from that is not as trivial, which is why a lot of the design has to be done up front. And you want to keep things consistent, especially as you start adding new features onto that as well. For instance, you work on a media application, and it's exciting. You're introducing video upload, massive requested feature. You can't just think about this feature in isolation. You probably have photo upload, and you might already have music upload, and all of these three things need to work together. Even though from a code perspective, you might write a different system for it, and you think, well, hey, we're going to treat it completely separate to photo upload. For the user, it's pretty much the same thing. An upload is an upload, and they don't really care what kind of media it is. So alone time is pretty important, especially to explore all of these different solutions, because it's so easy to get stuck in the things that you can't do, and you find yourself wishing you could do. But after you spend that time away, it's really important to come back with your team and collaborate. As soon as you have a decently fleshed out concept, before you're too stuck and too attached to it, get everyone together and think about the cases that you didn't consider, because you are inevitably human and you can't think of every single thing. Like Ash said the other day, criticism is absolutely fine. It doesn't reflect poorly on you. You can improve your design. It's okay. Equally, leverage your engineers that you have on your team because they know the tech, right? And as a designer, you may not have thought about technical constraints that you didn't realize there were. Unfortunately, though, often I also find engineers saying, well, no, we're not doing that design. And that's not really helpful as a designer because you want to know why you can't do these things. And I urge you to take a second to think about what is the difficult thing that they're asking. What is it that makes this a tricky thing to implement, and how can I help them, and how can I advise them how to dissect the design, and what is and isn't possible in there. Work together on it so you can find something that you can implement and ship in a reasonable time, and that will satisfy the things that users want, because that's the primary job of a designer. They are always there to vouch the user's perspective. Equally, the whole team, from product manager to engineer to designers, can have very valuable feedback and opinion. And at the end of the day, it's the product that you all together want to ship. So you don't want to disregard these opinions, but you do own the design responsibility as a designer. What I often do is, as soon as I've thought of a concept, I schedule a UX kickoff where I get everyone together, I get everyone's feedback, I listen, I try and listen as carefully as I can and take everything on board. But then, and I know that I'm not alone, I can lean upon the rest of the people in the team, but it's up to the designer what they do with it, as it should be, because it's their responsibility. Another thing I learned about this specifically is that Frankenstein does exist. And this is kind of the thing what it's called when you mismatch and say yes to everyone's opinion and everyone's changes, and you make this blue and you put the padding there and you move that, and then before you know it, you end up with an entire disaster, which means that design by committee is bad. You often hear this, but it's really, really, really bad. You can't just have everyone's design knowledge be crammed into one single thing and expect it to work, because I said this before, and I think it's worth repeating, consistency is key. So there should be someone who owns this and tries to consolidate everything and get the best outcome possible. Because the most important thing is that you appear seamless to the user. Even if you've got desktop applications versus phone applications, etc., users expect things to kind of work seamlessly as they move through the different platforms. And a way you can test this is by prototyping, which lately has gotten a lot of buzz. I think more and more people are getting into it and realizing the benefit of it. But what it allows you to do is actually validate your designs, because you can talk about it all you want, but you're missing a very important voice, and that's the voice of the user. So get them in and allow them to help you spot issues with your designs and with your code that you can still change before you ship it. And I've got thousands of people using it when it's actually a little bit too late if you could have spotted it earlier. Now, there are various ways of doing this. There are a lot of prototyping tools out there today, which I think a lot of people have heard of. Xure is actually very popular amongst the UX designers, but we're now finding Proto.io, Pixate, Cramer. Personally, I use Origami quite a lot, which I like. But you can't move away from the fact that you will probably have to do some prototyping in code at some point. As engineers, we don't like this. We don't want to throw away code. We don't want to be like, well, we're just going to test this and then chuck it. Like, well, what's the point of that then? But it's important because there are a lot of things you can't test in static prototypes, like when you make keyboards. You need to be able to type. The user needs to try these features in the midst of chatting to people and typing sentences and so forth. And I know I got really stuck last summer when we were building SwiftKey Keyboard for iOS 8. We were testing every single week, and I had to prototype things continuously, and I was meticulously trying to plan exactly where to put the code, how it was going to interact with the rest of the system, pretty much to the point that I could put a PR and merge it into master. That's not the point. Really, as I kind of learned throughout, is you should hack it and branch it, or the other way around. This sounded a bit better, but you get the gist. What I then ended up doing is having a kind of UX testing branch ready always, where master goes in and any of the other features that I just hack in. Because the point is you want to write the minimum amount of code you can do to validate this feature so you can know whether you then need to go and spend more time on it. And actually, this is a great thing. You should work with your designers to do this, because in the long run, it will help you save time, because by the time that you ship a feature and you think, oh, this is great, it's what we wanted to do, and you then find out it was actually necessary, you wasted a whole lot more time and code on that. But test results, you do need to take them with a pinch of salt. As useful as they are, terms and conditions can apply, it's not a weapon. And I don't know if you guys have this, but I often hear it used as such. Depending on what the person wants, the designer or the engineer or anyone else will say, oh, but the test results were bad, which means we can't ship this ever. No, it was really, really good, so we're shipping it anyway without exploring any other solutions. That's not really the point of it. It is just another data point. And what I think it's really useful for is it can help you explain the why. Because with analytics, you know things are happening. You can say, okay, this much of users will press this or do that. But you can't figure out why no one can find the sign-in button, for instance. And here, in a user testing session, you can stop them halfway and be like, hey, so what are you struggling with? Or you can observe them and see what it is that they're tapping and where they're expecting to see this. So it can help you uncover usability issues. But equally, Another thing that's often done in testing is figuring out what the initial emotional response is of a user. What's the look and feel of the application? What is it trying to convey? What is it trying to do? But this is actually part of a complete different design area, which is another thing I learned, that the scope is very far and wide. What I talked about today mainly is experience design, but there's a whole list of different types of designs. The emotional stuff falls a bit under both visual design, which is how you choose to color and style your application, how you want the contrast to be. It also applies to how usable your app is, even though it's not part of UX. If you've got disabled people who can't see very well, like the text sizes and things like that are important. But equally, there are things like emotional design, which has a whole area that personally I'm really interested in, is like how does it make people feel? The more traditional design a lot of people think of is actually graphic design. It favors print and media, logo design and such. Interaction design is exactly how do you then interact with this non-human thing? Do you speak to it? Do you touch it? How do you touch it? How do you do the interfaces? What will be signaled back to you? Will it vibrate? Will it shout? So there are all of these different types of design. So ask the right things of your designer. Just like in development, just because we're engineers or iOS developers doesn't mean that we can fix printers or that we can write web applications, unless you're Nick and you work on React Native. But it's not all comparable. So work together and try and find the right solutions for the right things. Now, why am I telling you this today? It's always nice. We went over a bit of UX Design 101. I don't know if you'll find any of this useful and can apply it to any of your products. But it's always nice to learn something new. You can blog about it. But at the end of the day, I think we could collaborate a lot better together. I think we should collaborate a lot better. I went to WWDC 2 years ago, and everyone thought I was a designer. And I thought, well, that's OK. I'm an engineer. I know I'm an engineer, so I don't really care. And now I find myself doing more and more design things next to it, and I'm like, well, but I'm still an engineer. Does it make me any less of an engineer? And why does it even matter? I find that in the developing community, we often think that we're pretty hotshot, we're pretty rock star. At the end of the day, we make the stuff. And we forget that it's about teams. It really is about all the people involved in shipping a product. And it is so, so important if you want to ship good stuff that will change the world, that will increase this 4% that Mike Lee was talking about. Or if you just want to ship awesome cat pictures. It doesn't matter, but you need to work together to do that. And behind awesome products are really, really awesome people. The first thing that we did at SwiftKey was I shipped SwiftKey Note. We were a team of 3 developers. But it would never have done so well as it did if it wasn't for our designer who put countless times and hours into the usability sessions, if it wasn't for our marketing team who ended up having us featured in 50 blogs and newspapers. We were Editor's Choice by Apple. We were in New and Noteworthy. All of this led to like 1 million downloads in a month. If it was just us developers, it could have easily just gone out there and kind of just died down, and that was it. So I urge you to not underestimate the people you work with. Share your technical knowledge and work together, because in this field, we really respect the final product. We love well-designed apps. We love bug-free apps. But we don't always appreciate the route it takes to get there. So that's what I had to say today. I hope you learned from this tale of the trench. So yeah, thanks.
Maxim, thank you very much.
Cheers.
So.